Hi YouTube, and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the second episode of my countdown to my 50th birthday. Today I am recounting memories of when I was age 11 to 20, and a little bit of a roller coaster ride with this one. Actually, the next one's going to be even worse. I had a lot going on when I was younger. So, anyway, when I was 11, that's when I was attending a private school for the first time. I think I started at age 10, so it was like right around there where I had been bullied a lot in elementary school, which I didn't really talk too much about in the last episode, but yeah, I was bullied a lot. As a kid, I was always a head shorter than all my classmates, and I spoke German. I didn't speak perfect English yet when I started school, so I had a lot of reasons why kids didn't like me. And so I ultimately ended up getting transferred to a little private school, hoping to get away from the bullies, and the bullies actually followed me. That's a whole story in and of itself. If you want like a little bit more background behind that, let me know in the comments. But yeah, there was this one family of 3 kids, and whenever I transferred schools. I transferred back and forth between the elementary school I started out at, which, believe it or not, this is in Chicago, and I was at Oscar Mayer Elementary. Because, yes, of course, in Chicago we have an Oscar Mayer Elementary School. And yes, it's named after the guy who created the Oscar Mayer brand. So I was at Oscar Mayer, then I went to this little school called Pillar of Fire, and then I went back to Oscar Mayer, and then back to Pillar of Fire. The long story there. And those bullies kept every time I transferred a month later, they transferred after me. Like, I could not get away from them, and the fact that their mom was letting them do this, or their mom was supporting him, I don't know. But then ultimately, because Oscar Mayer wouldn't let me transfer back again, so I ended up transferring to another. Thankfully, where I lived was right on the boundary between 2 school districts, so I was able to, or I was allowed to transfer into a different school called Agassiz, Lewis J. Agassiz Elementary. And those damn bullies followed me again, but I ultimately ended up getting a police not protection, but a restraining order against them, and they were told to stay away from me. Now, obviously, within the confines of the school, as long as I was with other people, it was fine. It was outside of the school building where they had to keep their distance, or face consequences and stuff. And so they finally they left me alone. But anyway, but when I'm 11, I'm still going to Pillar of Fire. I make no secret that I'm trans, and so at the time I was female presenting, and I had to wear the girls' uniform for the school with the whole plaid skirt, white blouse combo and everything. And it was around this time that I was walking to school, and I ended up barely escaping a pedophile, basically, because I was prepubescent at this point, so he was clearly a pedophile. Dude, I walked past his car as I was walking to school, and I just happened to glance over, and I noticed that the guy was completely naked, like not a stitch of clothing on him. And I saw his everything, and I was like very disturbed by this, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep walking, and I walked faster and just kept going. And then, like 2 seconds after I passed his car, he turns his car on and drives past me, and I was like, whatever, he's weird. Well, when I approached an alleyway, coming, along my route, the next thing I see is him driving up and pulling up in front of me and stopping his car and blocking the sidewalk, and then just kind of doing this gesture. And I was like, yeah, not happening. I knew he was naked, therefore I knew that he was up to no good, and so I crossed the street and got around him, and I kept walking. And there were no other people out on the sidewalks at the time that I could say, hey, this is, there's this weird naked dude following me. And he kept doing this every time I had, like, because every block in Chicago is split by an alleyway going through it. Because I think they're like crisscross alleys go through every square block, at least in the neighborhood that I was living in. And so every, like, I'd cross a street, and then I'd get to an alleyway, and then I'd, get to another street. So every half a block there would be either a street or an alleyway. And he avoided the streets because obviously there's going to be other cars, and so he couldn't necessarily stop and get away with things. There's much less likely to be cars in the alleyways, and so every alleyway, and I think there was at least 5 or 6 alleyways that between where I first encountered him and when I got to the school. And yeah, he just kept doing it, and I just kept avoiding him and just like not getting anywhere near him. And because he was naked, he couldn't, or at least in his mind, he decided he couldn't get out of his car, which, smart on his part, because if anyone had spied him, a naked dude running after a child on the sidewalk, cops would have obviously been called. So he kind of had himself trapped in the car. He couldn't just come after me and grab me, which I think was my saving grace in that particular case. Got to school, told my teacher, and I thankfully I had the wherewithal to get his license plate number, and we wrote it down on the blackboard. But they weren't like, are you making this up or whatever. My teacher wasn't entirely convinced that this was happening until the guy showed up during recess and approached some of the other kids with the car along the street, and not, he hadn't gotten out of the car. He was still nude. But and the kids actually saw that he had a gun on his dash as well, but thankfully he didn't try to brandish it. And they came in and reported this as well, and they also had the same license plate number that I had taken down. And so that's when we finally called the police, and we all kind of sat there and talked to them and gave our statements and everything. We found out later that this guy was wanted in several states for doing very bad things to kids, and they thanked us for the information. I don't know if they ever caught him. They never told us. I hope they did, because yeah, that was quite the ordeal. And then that same year, actually this actually happened before that, come to think of it, but that same year is the year that my grandfather passed away. So that was, like I said, that was just age 11 right there. Bam, was quite an eventful year for me. My grandfather had a stroke in February, and I remember this very clearly because it happened on the same night as the MASH season finale, or the series finale of MASH. So the date that happened was like February something or other, 1983, because I turned 12 at the end of that year. So in February I was still 11, and he had a stroke. They took him to the hospital, and it was like April when he finally passed. He was, it had hit the motor centers of his brain, so he no longer had motor control. And the thing I remember the most, I mean, obviously my grandmother and I would go and visit him at the hospital daily after I got out of school. Like, I would get out of school, she would come pick me up, and we'd go to the hospital and visit. And he was started off at one hospital, and then, I don't know, due to resources or what, they transferred him to another hospital. It was a little further away, so it took us longer to get there, but we still went every single day. And the one thing that struck me is you could tell that his mind was still intact. It hadn't hit his memory or cognitive senses or whatever. So his mind was still there. He just couldn't control anything. He couldn't, like, his body could move, so he wasn't paralyzed, but he no longer had mental control over anything. And after he moved to a new hospital, one of the things I also remember, he had, obviously on his charts and everything, like, he couldn't eat. He needed help eating, and so they would give him like baby food and pudding and whatever, and help him swallow. and things, and obviously through IVs and stuff, but they wanted to I don't know why they didn't have a feeding tube. Did they not use them back then? I don't know, but they were still feeding him food, at least at this stage of everything. But he had to have soft food. He needed to have help to swallow things and that kind of stuff. But they weren't using a feeding tube, and so one time my grandmother and I were there to visit, and we walk in on a nurse, and she was obviously a new nurse, hadn't seen her before, and this woman was literally trying to cram a fried chicken leg in my grandfather's mouth and yelling at him to stop being so lazy and stop refusing to eat. And we were like, what are you doing? The man can't, the man had a stroke, he can't move, he can't eat on his own, what are you doing? My grandmother grabbed this nurse and just like yanked her away. And thankfully, because we were so upset, we were yelling at her, and his doctor happened to be right down the hall, so he heard the commotion. He came running, and he, when we, like, the nurse still had the chicken in her hand, and she was being, like, I think we would call her a Karen these days. I mean, she was like being real entitled, like, like, I'm the nurse and I know that this patient is faking it and blah blah blah, just all of that kind of stuff. and the doctor was like, well, you're fired, like right then and there, like, you cannot, like, will you read the man's chart? He is, he is incapable of eating. Absolute nightmare for my grandfather, I'm sure, and it was picnic for the rest of us either. And then ultimately he had a cardiac arrest and another stroke. He had several strokes while he was in the hospital. I mean, the first one took out his motor centers, and then it just kept progressing. And then ultimately it hit his heart, and he had a cardiac arrest, and that's when the decision was made to pull the plug and do not resuscitate at that point, because he was just suffering. And after several months, it was clear that he was not going to get better. And so we kind of made the decision. I think my grandmother probably talked to him, and you could get him, like, he couldn't even blink his eyes or anything, but I think, like, through gestures with his eyes and stuff, he was able to convey a little bit, at least enough for us to know, like, yeah, he doesn't want to keep living like this. And we had no means to put him in a private facility. I mean, we were living off of his Social Security money. My mom had lost her job and just all this stuff, and so we were in no position to get him into better care anyway. And he was so far gone at that point that it really was for the best. And so we finally laid him to rest. So that was a year. Then the following year, after I had turned 12, the next summer, I mentioned this in the last video that I had the opportunity twice to go to Germany, once when I was 6 and once when I was 10. When I was 12 was the last time as a child that I was able to go to Germany with my grandmother. And once again, her old flame from when she was a young woman paid for the trip. Unfortunately, we had to cut it short because we were going to stay the full summer, so 3 months. And I know I stayed mostly in Frankfurt and with my Tante Eri again that summer. And then I think I was supposed to go down to southern Germany to see my grandmother's nephew, my Uncle Adolf, and her sister Lena, and my cousins down there. I always loved going down there because that was actually my favorite part of Germany. It's Isny im Allgäu, which is in the Baden-Württemberg region, and just a lot of fun down there. And I like those are some of my favorite cousins down there. And unfortunately, after a month, my grandmother shows up and she's like, "We're going home," and so we only got to spend a month. But that was actually one of the last times. This was, the last time I had a chance to exchange U.S. dollars for Deutschmarks. This was before the European Union was formed and euros became a thing, which was probably like 10 years later, because I did not go back to visit until much later. But at the time, it was like 4 Deutschmarks to the dollar was the exchange rate. And so I had saved up, because I was babysitting at this point, I had saved up $50, and I was able to exchange it for Deutschmarks, and I had 200 Deutschmarks. And I felt rich. I mean, considering how poor we kind of were, $200, you know, in my mind it was $200. And to be perfectly honest, you know, the cost of living in Germany wasn't 4 times higher than the US at the time, so it was very much, you know, like I had a lot more money than I'd ever had or knew what to do with. And my grandmother's sister Hilda took me out shopping for school supplies. I wanted German school supplies because I thought it would be kind of cool to have that. Their school supplies were a little bit different. They had more of a rucksack type of backpacks for books and everything, and they had these. They have this awesome thing, like all the kids in school have to use kind of fountain style pens. At least they did at the time. Ballpoint wasn't allowed. I don't remember why. At least this is what I remember. I maybe they were, you know, messing with me. I don't know. But as far as I remember, they all had to use the fountain style pens. And since you can, because I love the erasable ballpoint pens that they had back in the 80s. I don't know if they still make those. I haven't seen them for a while. But with the fountain pens, obviously they're not erasable. But someone had developed a type of chemical that they could put into a marker that if you ran it over the pelican ink of the fountain pens, it would make the ink go invisible, and so effectively erasing it. And so I had gotten at least one, but I think I probably had more than one. And there were the Pelican brand fountain pens that they had with the little. They had these little tubes of ink that you would just kind of pop into there and screw them closed, and a bunch of those markers that you can erase the fountain pen ink with, which apparently they still make. My cousin actually sent me some last year, and I was like, "Oh, they still make these! Awesome!" So that was kind of cool, and I had that, and I probably had a bunch of other school supplies, but that's the one that stands out in my memory the most. And I remember bringing all that stuff with when I started 7th grade at Agassiz, and all my friends there were like, "Wow, this is cool stuff." and I actually made some friends that year, because all of a sudden my German heritage was cool and not weird and creepy, and people stopped calling me a Nazi, which, you know, just because I spoke German didn't make that true, that's for sure. Anywho, so yes, so that was a fun thing. And then the following year, when I'm 13 going on 14, is when I started 8th grade. And 8th grade was an interesting year. I finally had a growth spurt. I went from being literally the shortest person from either gender in class to being the tall. I was either the tallest or the second tallest girl at the time, and I was actually taller than some of the boys, which was awesome in my head. The boys later on surpassed my growth spurt, because I think it was right around then that I hit my 5'4", and I'm still 5'4". I never got any taller after that. It's like I had that growth spurt and that was it. Which was, for me, was kind of disappointing, but you know, it is what it is. But that year, I mean, I was still getting teased and bullied a little bit. It had tapered off to a degree by that point, but it was still happening. So I usually avoided going out to the playground at recess. I mean, I was 13, 14. I didn't want to go play on the swings or whatever. And most of the 8th graders, because we didn't have middle school at this point. We were just kindergarten through 8th grade was elementary, and then 9 through 12 was high school. And so, since we were technically middle schoolers, but we weren't in a middle school, we were in a grade school, and we had recess, and it was kind of like just all the 8th graders just kind of sat around in the corners of the playground, just kind of, shooting the shit and everything. So there was, it was kind of boring. And since I didn't really have any close friends and stuff, I just said, hey, I'm gonna stay in the classroom and read. And because of the fact that I was being bullied, my 8th grade teacher allowed that to happen. And there was one day where all the boys went to the bathroom on the way out to recess, waited for the teacher to leave the classroom, and then snuck back in and surrounded my desk and decided it would be hilarious to say nasty things to me, kick my desk, and tease me for staying in and reading and being such a bookworm and blah, blah, blah. And I, at this point, had it with everything. And even though I'd never been able to kind of fight back and everything, I wasn't physically strong enough, especially like with all of these guys. I physically could not have taken them. But I just lost my head, and I said, will you leave me the fuck alone? The first time I ever used that word. And they knew that because my grandmother would wash my mouth out for soap for saying rats like an expletive. So literally, she did that. I would try and get around the don't swear by using non-swearing words, but if it was used in the context of a swear, or then same thing, you wash your mouth out. And so the fact that I used that word in that context, and that they were so shocked, they were like, all right, finally snapped, we're gonna back away now. And they left me alone. That's when I learned the power of language. Obviously I don't I don't swear a lot in my everyday to day, but I don't hold back from it when it's appropriate. So, but that was an amazing feeling, and things in school kind of started getting better for me. And then high school, which was obviously the next thing is getting into high school was interesting. I did not want to go to my neighborhood high school, which I think would have been Lincoln Park, because it didn't have the best reputation. I think my mom had gone there, but she ended up graduating in Florida. Long story, but I just really didn't want to go to that school. I wanted to go to a better school because I knew I wanted to go to college. And I know I applied at Mather High School and Near North High School, which I think Near North's been renamed to be named after some football player or something, I think, at this point. Walter Payton, maybe? I don't remember. But it was Near North High School at the time. And I think I was accepted at both, and I was debating between Mather and Near North. I ultimately ruled out Mather, I know, because they wanted to put me into what they were calling a transportation program, and I was like, I looked at the curriculum, and I was like, no, I don't want to study this, because they had special curriculum for these, because these were kind of like not quite magnet schools, but kind of magnet schools where you could be put into different programs and things. And the program that Mather wanted to put me in was not one I was interested in. So I think I was going to go to Near North. When my 8th grade teacher was like, no, you're going to Lane Tech. Which Lane Tech was like the best high school on the north side. Whitney Young was the best on the south side. We were the best on the north side. Although a lot of south side kids came all the way to the north side to go to Lane Tech anyway, just because it just had that reputation of just being one of the best of the public schools in Chicago. And my teacher was like, you're applying to Lane Tech. And I was like, why? Because it's better than Near North. And I was like, okay. And this was past the application date and everything, and he was like, I'm putting you through anyway. And thankfully my standardized test scores were good enough that I got in. So I went to Lane Tech, and Lane Tech was where things got a lot better for me in school, because most of the kids there, pretty much all of us were, cream of the crop in terms of standardized test scores and just being, the smarty pants from our elementary schools. So most of us had experience of being bullied at the elementary level. So once we were in high school, there was a lot less teasing and bullying. I mean, it still happened, and I didn't make friends easily. I was socially awkward, more socially awkward than the other kids in the school, but I did make a few friends here and there, and I did push myself outside of my comfort zone quite a bit. One of the things I did was the first thing is I joined a club, which for me was like terrifying, but at the same time I was like, it's computer club, and I loved computers, even though I'd only ever experienced computers at my uncle's house. He was the one with all the computers. We couldn't afford one, but I was like, ooh, if I can join this club, maybe I get to play with computers, and this would be great. And so I joined the computer club freshman year, and sophomore year, the majority of the members had been seniors and had graduated, and so there were very few of anyone left. And since I had been a freshman when I joined, I ultimately helped organize getting all the posters up to recruit new members, and because of that, they elected me president of the club. And so I ended up being president of the computer club for the rest of my time at Lane. And so I made some nice nerdy friends in that club. I mean, the club never got really big. I think we were like 5 to 6 people at any given time, but because our sponsor was Mr. Davis, I think. Oh, I forget again. That feels wrong. My brain and remembering names is terrible, but he was one of the biology teachers. I never actually had him as a teacher, but he also ran the computer lab. He had a computer background, and he ended up teaching us how to write BASIC, how to code in BASIC. And I ended up coding I think it was like a geography quiz or something. It took me months to do it because we only got about 20 minutes at the end of, in 10th period, 20 minutes once a week to use the computers. And that was club. And so it took a long time to do all it, because every time I went back I had to, like, where did I leave off? What was, I had to test it and make sure it was running, and then figure out, like, okay, where did I want it to go next? And so it took me a couple months to get that program running and stuff, but it was a lot of fun. And besides computer club, I ultimately ended up being in German club because, well, I speak German, so that was kind of a given. I joined sign language club, which was cool. I don't remember enough signs anymore. I mean, obviously, I love you, or I love you was another. I'm probably getting that wrong. I know thank you. And there's others that, like, if I think about it hard enough, I'll remember, but I don't remember a lot. But we did learn. The most fun thing is we learned several Christmas songs, how to sign Christmas songs. That was kind of fun. So, and I wish I had kept up with it. I do. And maybe one of these days I'll pick it up again and stuff. And obviously, if I ever made friends with someone who needed me to sign, I would totally dive right back in and relearn it, because obviously, I mean. And whenever I do encounter hearing impaired folks at who are checkout people at, like, Target and that kind of thing, I always try it and give them at least a thank you in sign. That's one of the reasons that one stuck with me. And then I also started a sci-fi club. It was originally Doctor Who club, and then I renamed it to sci-fi and just kind of opened it up and everything. And so. Gee, was I a geek and a nerd? Yeah, pretty much. Senior year was interesting. I mean, it was a good year, but it was also a weird year. I had finished almost all my credits for graduation, and I ended up getting to take some fun courses. I got to take a sci-fi course instead of regular English, which was a lot of fun. And I took, since I had been taking German, I had Honors 1, Honors 3, and AP German under my belt, and I was like, oh, what the heck, let me take some French. So, because if you remember from the last video, I had learned French in kindergarten because I lived in Canada for about 9 months, and so I was like, hey, let me refresh my French, and so I got in there because I had known how to speak French at the age of like 4 or 5. My pronunciation in class was actually pretty good. I can't remember a lick of the language anymore, but apparently if I try to say anything in French, I pronounce it really well. so there's that. And then that year I joined with the German club because we had international days at my high school. We had over 50 nationalities represented at our high school. It was because it was such a diverse, I mean, Chicago's a very diverse city, and because it was a magnet school, we had a very diverse population of students, and so we had so many different clubs of so many different nationalities. And so we had this 3-day festival where there would be booths where people would present things about their culture, bring in food to be sampled, and then there would be representative dances from our different cultures. Filipino club was one of the best, and the Korean club was really great too. There were a lot of amazing clubs, and obviously with the German club, I actually, that year was the only year that I actually joined the dancing troupe, and we had a waltz troupe, and then we had a folk dance group. So we had 2 different groups to represent the types of dancing done in Germany, and I did the waltz, which was a lot of fun to learn. I had a terrible dance partner, unfortunately. He was stiff as a broom, but we got through it. And unfortunately, the whole thing was almost completely ruined for me because for some reason that year I ended up getting a stalker in school. There was this creepy guy who all you had to do was smile at him, and he thought you were his best friend. And I think one time I was at my locker, and he was talking to somebody next to me, and he turned to me, and I think I smiled and said hi because he was looking at me, and I was trying to be polite. And from that moment on, he thought I was his girlfriend. Like, just boom. And I was like, no. No. No, we're not dating. No. I had a rather bad dating experience the year before, and I'm not even going into that one because that would take too long. But yeah, this guy just decided I was his girlfriend, and like, we never dated, we never went out. I tried to avoid him, and by the time we got to international days, he was also in the German club. He ended up being the guy in the chicken suit for the German chicken dance, and he got mad at me for not wanting to sit with him or something. I forget what it was, but he ended up grabbing some folding chairs and throwing them at me, almost hitting me. I dodged just out of the way, and I was like, okay, I have had it with you. And because everyone in the international days who was in the dance troops and everything else, we were allowed to skip classes for those 3 days so that we could participate in the various club activities and man our booths and participate in the dances and everything else. But whenever I wasn't scheduled, because I wasn't manning the booths, and so whenever I was not scheduled for the dancing, I just went to my classes. I was like, I'm getting away from you, because he was not in any of my classes. I still remember I was in the sci-fi class that afternoon, avoiding him, and he was standing and staring through one of the windows in the door, and my teacher turned up, because we were watching a movie that day, since it was the international days, and so people weren't, like, their brain-wise, we weren't very focused on schoolwork, so most of the teachers kind of went light on us, even if we were in classes and stuff, and we were trying to watch a movie, and he was just like laser focused on me. And so she actually turned the lights on and confronted him and was like, get out of here. And I think also my German teacher from Auersberger helped get me away from him by giving me access to a part of the one gym, the bleachers that were not supposed, students weren't supposed to be in there during international days, and she gave me a pass to get in there to keep him away from me when I wasn't. And then for the last dance, my club decided to kind of go off the rails a little bit, and all the boys took off their tux jackets and stuff, and the girls put the tux jackets on, and the boys put on the grass skirts from the Hawaiian Club, and so we kind of did this little kind of role reversal with the dance and stuff. From Auersberger was not happy with us for doing this. She was like, why are you, like, the whole gender bending thing was not something she approved of, but we loved it. We had a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of fun with it. And I remember I was right in the process of putting my dress in my locker and putting on the tux jacket and everything when Mr. Stalker comes up to me and is yelling, why are you avoiding me? You know, do you want to break up with me? I'm like, we're not together. And I'm trying to get myself down to the gym on time, and the bell rings, and everyone's, you know, just starting to come out of their classes and stuff, and I just yell at the top of my lungs at him, like, just leave me alone. If not, I'm going straight to the principal and reporting you for harassment. And thankfully that finally got through to him, and he did finally leave me alone. But whew, that that could have gotten a lot worse than it did. He could have followed me home. He could, like, who knows what he could have done, and I'm glad he didn't. But yeah, that was quite a thing. Okay, so only a couple. So I'm 18 at this point. 19, age 19 and 20. So just to quickly get into that. Well, this is, you know, again, long video. Sorry. trying to cover an entire decade in a video is not always easy. Obviously I graduated high school and I took the summer off. I normally worked every summer just to have a little more money, but I decided not to that summer, just so that I could have like a final summer off before becoming an adult and starting college and everything. And once I was in college, because I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago, and I did have to work to get myself through. I did get government grants because my family was poor enough that I was eligible to get grants and things, thank goodness. But I still had to work so that I could help put food on the table and that kind of stuff. And so I had a job on campus, and I did like 10 to 15 hours a week there while I was in school, and then did 40 hours a week whenever I had a break. So spring break, summer break, winter break, I would switch to 40 hours a week. And then besides that, I had at least 2 or 3 babysitting gigs every week as well in the evenings. And I would often, you know, like I'd spend time with the kids, put the kids to bed, because usually with the families I babysat for, the kids would be in bed by 8 or 9, and then the parents wouldn't be home until midnight, at least, sometimes 1 a.m. And so I would have a solid 2 or 3 hours where I was able to get my schoolwork done, get my studies done, and things like that. And I usually had enough time to tidy up the house a little bit. That's one of the reasons I was a popular babysitter, because I would actually clean up after the kids, put their toys away, wash the dishes, and just all the little things that I think, you know, that the mom, because they all had 2 or 3 kids. And one of the reasons they needed a night out once a week was so that they could, you know, relax and you know, be themselves and be adults for a while. And so, yeah, I usually would spend a half hour to an hour tidying and then studying after that, because I almost always had enough time to do that. So that was kind of great. And I had my first real boyfriend. Like I said, I kind of dated in high school a little. That one's a longer story that I don't have time for. But I did date this guy that I had met in biology class in college, and the only thing, an interesting memory of him, because ultimately I decided that we weren't a good fit together, and like, he was a cool guy and everything. There was nothing wrong with him. He wasn't a bad boyfriend. We just weren't clicking. And so I wanted to break up with him, but I was terrified of breaking up with him, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So I concocted this really weird story about being an alien and waiting for the mothership to come pick me up, and I needed to tell him this so that he wouldn't worry about me when I disappeared. And I told him that because I wanted him to think I was insane and not feel bad about breaking up with me. I don't know where I came up with this. This is the reason why I'm a writer, because overactive imagination. I think I mentioned that in the last video, and that's what I came up with. Yeah, I was a little insane just for coming up with that, I know. And oddly enough, it's funny, so before the breakup, he had taken me to a concert with his favorite band, Styx. It's the first concert, live concert I've ever gone to, that was actually kind of cool. I really like that. And he had agreed, like, I made him agree, like, if I go to your Styx concert, you go to a concert with me. And I wanted to take my mom to Peter, because my mom and I were both fans of Peter, Paul, and Mary, and they had I think it was the 25th anniversary tour. Might have been their 30th, but I think it was the 25th. I forget exactly, but it was one of those anniversary tours that they were doing in the early 90s, and could have been 30th. Anyway, and so I was like, hey, could you take us to that concert? And unfortunately, I broke up. I did the crazy breakup before that concert happened, and I still needed him to take us because we didn't have a car, and the only way to get out to that venue was with a car. There weren't trains and that kind of stuff to easily access it, so he agreed, and yeah, awkward. Just so much awkward. It was a great concert though, and I had a lot of fun. So that kind of rounds out, age 11 to 20 right there is just a massive insanity. Told you it was a bit of a roller coaster ride, and I didn't even touch on everything. But anyway, I know this is like a super long video, so thank you for joining me. Thank you for sticking around. If you are still here, I hope you are liking this, so give me a thumbs up. If you have questions or anything, leave me comments. I love comments. I love to engage and interact with people, so if you comment, I will probably talk to you. So until tomorrow and the next video, take care. Bye bye.